Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when the church bells didn't just ring on Sundays. They marked every hour of your waking and sleeping life. You're in the Middle Ages now. Specifically, you're a priest. Yes, you. Sleep-deprived, Latin-mumbling, mud-splattered, probably lice-bitten priest. It's cold. Colder than you expected. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress in a room that smells like old books, tallow smoke, and faint despair. And then bells. Not the cheerful kind. These tolled deep and slow, echoing off stone walls like a warning. Matins, the very first office of the day, and it happens before dawn, as in the middle of the night. You sit up, rubbing your face with hands that still smell faintly of frankincense and sheep. You forgot to stoke the brazier again. The air bites your skin. There's frost on your water jug. You dress quickly. A thin linen shift, a scratchy woolen robe, the same sandals you wear every day. Your toes will regret this. You step outside into the cloister walk, breath puffing white, torchlight flickering in the archways. Somewhere, a sleepy monk coughs. Someone else mutters a psalm under their breath. Everyone looks half dead and, honestly, you feel it. The chapel glows ahead, golden candlelight spilling onto damp flagstones. Inside, it's barely warmer. The stone walls seem to suck the heat from your bones. You bow toward the altar, genuflect, and take your place. The chanting begins. It's in Latin, of course. You know the words, sort of. You hum through the parts you forget, hoping St. Augustine isn't listening too closely. The rhythm is slow, hypnotic. Psalms, antiphons, readings. One monk actually dozes off standing up. You envy him. Historians still argue whether matins was ever optional for parish priests. Monks had to do it, obviously. But in remote villages, records suggest some priests may have accidentally slept through it, especially in winter. But not you. You're trying to do this right, even if your eyelids feel like granite. After matins comes lauds, the sunrise prayer. You trudge outside again, the eastern sky just beginning to smudge blue. Birds stir in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster announces his deeply inconvenient enthusiasm for mornings. The village is waking too. Smoke curls from a few thatched roofs. A dog barks. Someone's already shouting about missing firewood. You sigh. It's going to be one of those days. Your stomach growls. You haven't eaten since noon yesterday, unless you count the chunk of communion bread you may or may not have nibbled after Massachusetts. Technically a sin, but a hungry sin. You head to the refectory, where the other clergy sit around a rough wooden table. The food is beige. Always beige. Barley porridge, maybe a slice of hard cheese if you're lucky. No meat, it's Wednesday. You murmur a prayer and dig in with a wooden spoon. A small spider dangles from the ceiling. You stare at it, wondering if it's fasting too. Brother Alaric leans toward you and mutters, "Did you hear about the miller's wife?" You didn't. You're not sure you want to. But now it's your job to know. She's been having visions. Says St. Bridget spoke to her from the butter churn. You blink. Third time this year. Alaric sighs. Butter churn theology. Excellent. You'll need to investigate, of course. Or at least pretend to. You don't want another bishop's inquiry. The last one involved a lot of parchment and a deeply unsettling conversation about heretical dairy products. Your breakfast ends. You scrape the bowl clean, rinse it in cold water, and head toward the scriptorium. You promised the abbot you'd copy at least 2 psalms today. Your fingers are already cramping just thinking about it. Still, the chapel is quiet now. Golden light streams through stained glass, dappling the flagstone floor. For a moment, it's peaceful, holy even, then you hear a crash, and a goat bleats, loudly, from inside the vestry. You close your eyes. It's going to be a long, long day. You don't even ask why there's a goat in the vestry. You just go, because that's what you do now. You go uncalled. You clean what others won't. You bless what others fear. You enter rooms prepared for anything. The goat, for the record, is chewing on a corner of your second-best altar cloth. Its eyes meet yours with a kind of smug indifference, like it knows you can't afford to replace that linen. You sigh deeply, shoo it gently, and begin the age-old priestly ritual of damage control. The vestry is a mess. The censer has been knocked over. A small pot of chrism oil lies on its side. slowly leaking onto the stone floor in a glistening puddle of sacramental oh no. You mutter a prayer, not for spiritual strength, but for patience. Eventually, Brother Cadwin appears, red-faced and panting. She got in when we were airing the south door. She, of course the goat has a gender. Maybe a name. Maybe even a criminal record. I'll tie her up by the orchard, he mumbles, grabbing the goat's tether and leading her away. You don't ask how often this has happened. You already know it's not the first time. Once the mess is cleaned, you finally turn to your morning duties. The town is stirring now. You've got confession at midday. But first, there's the matter of little Edric's boils. Again, his mother swears it's a curse. You're pretty sure it's just poor hygiene and too much barley ale. Still, she's waiting at the chapel steps with the boy, who's squirming and scratching like a man possessed. You say the prayer of healing over him, trace the sign of the cross on his forehead with blessed oil, and hand his mother a pouch of dried rosemary for burning. She thanks you profusely. You remind her gently that, no, she cannot also burn her neighbor's chicken in the same fire. That's not how blessings work. Historians still debate just how much medical authority village priests wielded. Some records suggest they were healers by default, dispensing prayers and herbs in equal measure. Others claim that most priests, like you, were making it up as they went along, fueled by folk wisdom, saint stories, and sheer improvisation. Back inside, you prepare for Massachusetts. The altar must be cleaned, the chalice polished, the host cut and counted. Everything has to be done just so. You catch yourself humming a hymn, something about heavenly bread, as you line up the wafer fragments. A bell rings. The villagers begin to arrive. Shoeless children, weathered farmers, women in cloaks, still damp from the morning mist. They all file in, heads bowed. Some cross themselves. Others just look sleepy. You begin the liturgy, voice steady despite your aching legs. It's in Latin, of course. Most of the congregation doesn't understand a word, but they know the rhythm. They know when to kneel, when to mutter amen, when to peek up at you with wide, anxious eyes. You try not to think about how your breath smells. Halfway through, a child sneezes violently. Another begins crying. Someone's stomach growls like a bear. You plow forward, determined not to laugh. Or pass out. And then it happens. Right as you lift the chalice, the church cat launches itself in the rafters. It lands with precision in the lap of the miller's wife, who shrieks and drops her prayer book into a puddle of candle wax. You freeze. So does everyone else. Then the baker's boy laughs. Then another. And suddenly the chapel is full of chuckles, stifled but contagious. You can't help it. A smile breaks across your face. Because this too is holy. Chaotic, absurd, very human, but still holy. You finish the service, cheeks slightly pink, and bless the congregation. As they leave, one old man hands you a boiled egg. For strength, he says. You pocket it with thanks. You're not sure if it's fresh, but hey, it's protein. Back in the rectory, you finally sit down. Your feet throb, your shoulders ache, and your brain is already listing what you forgot. The bishop's letter to reply to, the graveyard weed pulling, the sermon to finish for Sunday. Still, for now, there's silence. A cup of thin ale, a crust of brown bread. Maybe, dare you hope, a nap? You close your eyes, and someone bangs on the rectory door. Father, it's the cooper's daughter. She's seen the Virgin in her soup. You groan softly and rise again. Just another morning. You don't run to the cooper's house. That would show enthusiasm. And let's be honest, today you're running more on stale bread and existential dread than divine energy. But you do walk briskly, robes flapping slightly with every stride, careful not to trip on the uneven cobbles or that one root near the church gate that's been trying to kill you for months. The cooper's daughter is waiting at the threshold, wide-eyed, holding a bowl of what appears to be cabbage stew. It does not look miraculous. It looks like a failed potion experiment. Still, you compose your face into this serious but not skeptical expression you've been perfecting. She says the Virgin's face floated to the top, her mother whispers. Right after we added the leeks. You peer into the bowl. What you see is a bubble, a blob of fat, and a piece of overcooked parsnip doing its best impression of an eyebrow. You nod slowly, thoughtfully. Have you eaten it? You ask. The girl shakes her head. I didn't want to bite the Blessed Mother. Fair. Honestly, admirable restraint. You offer a quiet blessing over the bowl and suggest gently that next time they document it with charcoal and parchment before it dissolves. Then you steer the conversation toward anything else. Historians still argue whether visions like this were encouraged by the clergy or merely tolerated. Some priests treated them as legitimate miracles, others as problematic distractions. You've decided it's best to lean into the mystery and hope the Holy Office never comes asking. By the time you return to the church, there's already someone waiting at the chapel steps, Brother Elias, the new monk from across the river. He's younger than you, freshly tonsured, and radiates that annoying new priest smell. Hope. Want help with the records? He asks, smiling. You pause. This is either a trap or a rare moment of mercy. You nod, hand him the cracked leather ledger, and guide him toward the sacristy where the donation lists, parishioner rolls, and penance tallies live. You both sit down on low wooden stools. He begins transcribing with neat, painfully precise handwriting. I like the quiet here, he murmurs. It feels eternal. You glance around the room, at the drafty wall crack, the candle sputtering dangerously near a loose scroll, the faint stench of old wax and mildew, and nod politely. Timeless. Still, it's not all bad. Working beside someone who doesn't immediately ask if you can exorcise their cousin's bad dreams is oddly comforting. You fall into a quiet rhythm. Dip the quill, write, sand the page, breathe. That piece lasts a good 25 minutes, until the bell rings. Not the mass bell, the other bell, the oh no someone died bell. You look up. So does Brother Elias. He looks vaguely excited. You, however, feel the familiar knot of duty tighten in your gut. You step outside, and there's a cluster of villagers gathered near the square. A body lies under a cart, half covered with a cloak. The miller leans on his cane, looking grim. Drop dead, he says. Mid-apple. You nod solemnly. Was it a good apple? Didn't finish it, someone replies. Might have been bad. You kneel beside the body. It's the blacksmith's uncle. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old enough to make this seem expected. His face is calm. One hand still clutches the bitten fruit. You offer the rites, words flowing from muscle memory. Latin murmurs, signs of the cross, sprinkles of water from a worn flask you always carry just in case. A dog barks in the distance. A child coughs. Then you help lift the body onto a cart. It'll be buried tomorrow. For now, it stays in the charnel shed beside the graveyard. Just another soul waiting for sunrise. You return to the rectory, robes dusted with hay and solemnity. Brother Elias is still writing, humming a hymn you half remember from training. And you? You sit down heavily, rest your head on your hand, and whisper a little prayer that no one else dies today, or sees visions in vegetables, or unleashes more goats. You hear a distant bleat. Too late. You're not surprised to find a goat on the altar. You are surprised it's wearing a wreath of daisies and has somehow acquired a small linen shawl. Sister Bertrada stands nearby, arms folded like a storm cloud in a habit. The children, she says dryly. They said it was for St. Ethelburga's feast, a votive offering. You raise an eyebrow. A living votive offering, better than the lizard they brought last week. Fair point. The goat bleats gently and begins nibbling at a corner of the gospel book. You rush forward with monk-like speed and snatch it away, just before teeth meet vellum. The shawl slips down, revealing a surprisingly clean coat. Clearly, someone's been brushing this goat, probably with your own hair comb, if past trends continue. You gently coax the goat down and lead it outside. A pair of grubby-faced children trail behind, giggling. Can't we keep her in the cloister? One asks. She brings blessings. She brings fleas, you mutter. Then louder. No goats in sacred spaces, remember? They groan, then scamper off, leaving you to usher the goat toward the churchyard, where it's at least slightly less sacrilegious. The goat turns back once, eyes soulful, as if to say, this isn't over. You believe her. Back inside, the church smells faintly of clover and goat. You light more incense, copal resin, sharp, and earthy. It helps. A little. The morning hours slip into their usual rhythm. Mending altar cloths, checking for candle leaks, removing tiny messages stuffed under the Virgin's feet. Please make my mom stop yelling, is a repeat offender. You tuck them into the reliquary box. Out of reverence, maybe just to keep them from fluttering away. Then you hear it, the unmistakable sound of boots stomping up the nave. The reeve. You sigh deeply before turning. He's large, red-faced, and always looks like he's either about to deliver bad news or demand a donation receipt. He's holding a scroll. A petition, he announces, waving it like a flag of bureaucracy. From the guilds. You take it gingerly. Is it about the fish again? No. This time it's the bell. The church bell, your old frenemy. It does ring unevenly. It leans to one side, and sometimes it sounds like someone's groaning in Latin. You squint at the scroll. They want repairs, you say. They want you to make the repairs. Of course they do. Historians still argue whether priests were expected to be fully literate in practical matters like carpentry and metallurgy. Some evidence suggests rural priests often had to do double duty, soul saving and roof patching. Your blistered hands can confirm that's true. So you climb the bell tower. It's rickety, always has been. You count your steps like penance, testing each one with a toe before trusting your full weight. At the top, you find a bell slightly off kilter like it's doing a tipsy curtsy. You squint at the ropes, adjust the pulleys, and tighten a few wooden pegs with the small hammer you keep tucked under your belt. All while praying no one rings it while you're up here. A sparrow watches you from the rafters, judging. You climb back down sweaty and dust-covered. Someone's waiting below. Of course. It's Agatha, the baker's wife, holding a small bundle wrapped in linen. She looks around furtively, then thrusts it toward you. Can you bless this? You open the bundle. It's a sourdough starter. Is it possessed? You ask, not entirely joking. No, but it hasn't risen in days. I think it's cursed. You suppress a sigh. And you want divine gluten intervention? She nods. You murmur a blessing over the dough. It smells oddly like vinegar and hope. She beams, curtsies, and leaves in a swirl of flower-scented breeze. You lean against the doorway. A rooster crows, even though it's past midday. Somewhere behind you, the goat bleats. Again. And just like that, your peace is gone. Again. You're awakened the next morning, not by the bells. Oh no. Those you can sleep through, but by the sound of Brother Aldrich shouting at a squirrel. You peek out the narrow window above your straw-stuffed pallet just in time to see the offending rodent dangle triumphantly from the belfry rope, a crust of bread clamped in its teeth. Aldrich hurls a sandal with admirable accuracy, but the squirrel escapes, tail flicking in victory. You sigh, roll upright, and realize your ankle has decided to behave like a martyr today. It throbs rebelliously as you hobble toward the basin of cold water in the corner, splash your face, and offer a brief, muttered prayer for patience, wisdom, and the eradication of small woodland thieves. Then it's time for matins. You shuffle into the chapel, still adjusting your cincture, yawning as you take your place near the front. The candles gutter slightly in the morning breeze. Someone sneezes twice, and the whole row of brothers instinctively mumbles Deus te Juvit. Today's psalms are unusually somber. A funeral is scheduled for later, and the atmosphere is thick with incense and existential dread. You lead the prayer with the slow, droning cadence of a man who suspects half the room is still asleep behind their eyelids. You're probably right. The deceased is a miller who claimed to have seen a demon in the grain chute 2 weeks ago. Whether the apparition pushed him or he slipped. Well, historians still argue whether accidents in medieval mills were truly accidents or divine judgments for poor tithing habits. After prayers, it's straight into your mid-morning duties, visiting the sick. A small wooden satchel waits for you by the door, packed with your priestly essentials. Holy water, a tiny vial of oil, and a packet of herbs that smells like burnt licorice. The herbs are for the smell. Trust me, the first stop is old Gerwine, who has gout and an imagination. He's convinced the swelling in his toes is punishment for stealing a chicken 37 years ago. You listen patiently while he recounts the theft in harrowing detail. complete with dramatic reenactment using a wooden spoon as the chicken. You bless his foot, offer mild comfort, and resist the urge to suggest he confess to the actual owner, who's been dead for decades. From there, it's on to a young woman with a fever and a mother who believes in onion poultices and the power of relics. She insists you touch her daughter's forehead with a fragment of St. Milburgis sandal. You comply, though you're fairly certain the relic is actually a carved piece of cowhide donated by a particularly enthusiastic pilgrim. Still, the girl smiles faintly. You leave the mother with a sachet of dried yarrow and instructions to steep it in boiled wine, then pray she doesn't misinterpret boiled as fermented. Back to the church you go, and there's the funeral procession waiting at the lich gate. Mourners in dark cloaks, a donkey dragging the bier, and someone playing a sorrowful tune on a badly tuned flute. The mood is solemn. You lead them in, sprinkle the body with holy water, and say the usual rites. You keep your voice even, your hands steady, and only slightly flinch when the donkey sneezes explosively beside the altar. Afterward, the widow presses a small parcel into your palm. For your trouble, she whispers. Inside, a half wheel of cheese, wrapped in cloth and radiating suspicious warmth. You accept it gracefully. It's more useful than the payment you got last week. An old boot and a handful of goose feathers. You stash the cheese in the sacristy and head outside to breathe. The sun's high now, glaring against the thatched rooftops and shimmering off the muddy road like molten brass. You spot 3 village boys poking something in a ditch. You approach warily. What V you found? They look up, grinning. A sin. You blink. A what? A sin, one says, pointing to a squirming toad with one leg dipped in red dye. We caught it stealing crumbs from the chapel. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Toads can't sin, but it looked guilty. You confiscate the toad, bless it half-heartedly, and release it behind the hedgerow. By late afternoon, you're repairing the chapel's front door again. Someone leaned on it during morning prayers, and the whole thing came off its hinges like a drunk falling out of a tavern. You've wedged it with twine, a few nails, and what may be a sliver of the true cross. Unverified. As you hammer, Sister Bertrada wanders past. You've missed Sext. You glance up, sweat dripping. I miss sanity, too. No one's holding that against me. She doesn't laugh, but you think she smirks a little before disappearing around the corner. You finish the door, pat it affectionately like a cow, and trudge back to the cloister just in time to hear the faintest rattle from your storage cupboard. You open it slowly. The goat's back, and she's brought a friend. You stare at the goat. The goat stares back. Its friend, a smaller, scruffier accomplice with eyes like polished malice, chews absently on what might once have been a hymn book. You're too tired to confirm. I don't suppose either of you is here for confession, you mutter. The smaller one lets out a bleat that sounds dangerously close to a challenge. You sigh, grab your broom, affectionately known as St. Bristles, and begin the gentle ritual of goat removal. This involved a lot of clucking, coaxing, and muttered theological threats. Eventually, after several laps around the cloister and at least one near miss with a baptismal font, both goats skitter out the door with a flounce of wrong nobility. You latch the cupboard with a prayer and a spare belt. Just in time, too. Vespers is approaching, and the bell sounds more like a groan today, like even it's fed up with the liturgical schedule. Evening prayer draws a small crowd. The faithful trickle in, villagers with sunburned faces and dirt-caked hands, a woman with a sleepy baby, 2 merchants who smell faintly of onions and ambition. You light the candles, straighten your stole, and begin the chants. The music echoes off the stone walls like whispered echoes of eternity. It's almost peaceful, almost, until Brother Guy sneezes violently mid-Ave Maria and knocks over a candle stand. You catch it just before it crushes a visiting pilgrim's toe. After prayers, people linger. They always do. You're cornered by the cooper's wife, who wants to know whether dreams about leeks are prophetic. You try not to blink too hard, while suggesting it probably depends on the seasoning. Next is an elderly man convinced he's been cursed by a passing peddler because his chickens have stopped laying eggs. You prescribe a prayer, a pinch of blessed salt, and the firm suggestion that he stop yelling at his hens every morning. Then you're pulled aside by a novice with a wax tablet full of Latin questions. Declensions. Again. Why does Puella become Puelli? He asks. You pause. Because the Lord enjoys mystery. He doesn't laugh. He writes it down like gospel. Dinner is a thin barley stew, 2 onions, and a silence so heavy you can hear someone's stomach gurgle 3 benches over. The brothers eat with the weariness of men who have faced not only spiritual warfare, but actual warfare against rodents, structural instability, and the occasional misfiring latrine. After supper, you sit under the archway by the cloister and watch the dust turn the stones pink. For a moment, there's calm, a soft breeze, the flutter of linen robes. You let your head tilt back and breathe. Then you hear the distant sound of chanting, unfamiliar chanting. You frown, stand, and follow the noise. Around the side of the church, past the cemetery, toward the field where Brother Edric once claimed to see a ghost in the shape of a rutabaga. There they are, a band of barefoot zealots, walking slowly in a circle, carrying a plank with a carrot nailed to it. You raise an eyebrow. Pilgrimage. The leader stops and bows. The holy root has spoken. Of course it has. They request water. You offer it. You also recommend a night indoors and gently suggest their chanting not happen during Compline. They agree, if reluctantly. You make a mental note to hide the communion wine tonight. Back in the rectory, you find a scroll waiting on your cot. It's from the bishop. It begins with, "To my most loyal, if administratively chaotic servant." You don't have to read much further to know it's bad news. The bishop wants a new census of the parish. Names, ages, sins confessed and unconfessed, births, deaths, mysterious goat sightings. All of it. By the end of the scroll, you're weeping gently into a handkerchief that smells faintly of beeswax. You unroll a fresh piece of parchment and start listing names. Marjorie the midwife, Tom of the weasel tooth, Baldric, who may or may not exist. You write slowly, praying the bishop's curiosity wanes before yours does. Later, you clean the chapel. It's a quiet job, if you ignore the echoes of every misstep you've taken today. The waxy floors glint in the torchlight. You hum to yourself, an old hymn your mother used to sing when the goats got into the grain bin. You pause. You hear something, a tiny tap 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 from the bell tower. You know that sound. You do not want to know that sound. You climb the narrow stairs, each one a creaking accusation. At the top, by the great bell, you find it. A squirrel. The same squirrel, holding the same crust of bread. This time, however, it has backup, a crow with the confident air of an accomplice who handles the outside work. You don't scream. You just sit down on the stair and whisper, "Lord, grant me strength." The squirrel drops the bread. The crow picks it up. You weep softly and descend. By nightfall, the village sleeps. Your lamp flickers low. You check on the relics, lock the chapel door, and finally return to your bed. Your ankle still aches. Your shoulders are tight, but the silence now feels earned. Your last thought before sleep, surely tomorrow can't be worse. It can't, but you don't know that yet. You wake to the sound of bells. Not church bells, though, cowbells. Several, and not in harmony. You stumble out of bed, pull on your robe, and peer out the tiny window of your chamber. Dawn hasn't even had the decency to show her face yet. But there, marching confidently across the churchyard like it's a parade ground, is Farmer Aldred's entire herd. Cows, goats, one very confused-looking pig. You blink. Once, twice. The animals seem to be heading directly for the front doors of the chapel. You throw on your boots, grab your lantern, and hustle down the corridor, muttering a quick prayer that whatever this is doesn't involve hoof prints on the altar cloth. By the time you reach the doors, it's too late. 2 cows have breached the nave. One is calmly sniffing a candle stand. The other appears to be contemplating baptism. Aldred arrives, panting and barefoot, clutching a coil of rope. "Sorry, Father. They spooked at the miller's dog." You give him a look that says, spooked is not a spiritual excuse. It takes 15 minutes for monks and 1 bucket of turnips to herd them all out again. You're going to be finding cow hairs in the pews for weeks. After that chaos, Lauds feels almost peaceful, until Brother Alwyn forgets the words halfway through and begins singing the morning psalm in what sounds suspiciously like Old Norse. You don't correct him. At this point, you assume divine interpretation applies. Breakfast is a lump of rye bread, half an apple, and a gulp of tepid ale. You eat it seated on a bench outside, watching a snail climb the monastery wall. It looks much more relaxed than you feel. Then it's time for parish rounds. You grab your satchel. Inside, holy water, a worn psalter, a few extra communion wafers, a bit of sage for non-official purposes, and one emergency carrot. Don't ask. You set out, feet squelching in the damp morning grass. Your first stop, old Etta, the village herbalist. She greets you with her usual, "Did you bring the basilica leaves, or just the blessings?" You hand her both. Etta's chickens peck at your boots as she explains the recent dream disturbances in the village. Apparently, 3 people have reported waking up mid-snore to see the Virgin Mary feeding them porridge. You write this down, carefully, slowly. Historians still argue whether visions like this were divine revelations or the result of moldy grain. You lean toward the grain, personally, but you also nod solemnly and offer to bless the porridge pot. Then it's over to Wolf's cottage. Wolf being the blacksmith with a voice like a bear and a laugh that causes seismic activity. He's convinced his forge is cursed because his hammer keeps going missing. You find it 10 minutes later inside his boot. "Divine mischief," he mutters. "That's what it is." You suggest St. Eligius as a patron. Wolf looks doubtful, but agrees to try lighting a candle next time he misplaces something larger than his own foot. By mid-morning, the sun is high. Your robes are clinging to your back, and you've blessed 2 wells, 1 field, and a suspiciously large pumpkin. You've also been asked to name a baby, Sabella, bless a cat, begrudgingly, and listen to a confession from a man who stole his neighbor's ladder 4 years ago and used it to paint his own barn because his angels told him to. You forgive him, mostly because the ladder has since collapsed and broken 3 of his toes. As you walk back toward the rectory, you hear singing. Not church singing, field singing. You follow the sound and discover 3 children balancing on the stone wall of the graveyard, chanting an improvised hymn about Saint Cabbage and the lettuce of light. You gently suggest this may not be entirely canon. They laugh and give you a daisy crown. You wear it, because dignity is already half gone and the other half is overrated. Back at the rectory, you change into your second robe, the less muddy one, and just as you settle down with a parchment scroll of accounts, boom, thunder. The heavens open in true medieval style with drama. Rain lashes the cloister, leaks in through the chapel roof again, and transforms the cemetery path into a mudslide. You place basins under the worst leaks, mutter a few discouraged psalms, and use your sleeve to mop water off the altar rail. You wonder, not for the first time, whether God might be sending a message. The bishop's courier arrives just as you ring out your hymn. He looks dry, which is suspicious. "I bring word from the diocese," he announces like this is an honor. You open the scroll. The bishop wants you to deliver a sermon next week, in Latin, on the virtues of celibacy, to an audience of farmers, half of whom don't speak Latin, and the other half who think virtue is the name of someone's ox. You stare at the scroll, you stare at the sky, and you laugh. Just once. A short, slightly unhinged bark. Then you return to your desk and begin composing. 1 phrase at a time. Virtus et complexio. You dip your quill again. You are a man of God. But even God, you suspect, is watching this and chuckling softly behind a cloud. Just before dusk, the bell rings again. This time it's not for prayer. It's Brother Matthew, hammering the side of the chapel bell with a stick because the rope broke again. You sigh. That rope has snapped 4 times this year, and you're fairly certain it's the Lord's way of suggesting you invest in goatskin twine instead of whatever this is. Evening chores await. First, tending to the chapel candles. They don't light themselves, and the beeswax ones, your only luxury, must be trimmed just so, or they drip wax all over the altar like it's trying to grow stalactites. You've developed a technique, a snip, a twist, and a quick muttered prayer that the fire stays on the wick this time. One of the novices passes you a fresh taper, eyes wide. He's new, and everything seems like a miracle to him, including matches. Why don't we just light them all at once? He whispers. You reply without looking up. Because last time someone did that, we had a baptism by fire. He doesn't ask again. Next comes the wine inventory, which of course means going down into the cellar. Alone, with the bats, and the smell. You duck under the low archway and descend the cool stone steps, carrying a lantern that flickers like it's nervous too. The cellar is lined with amphorae and dusty barrels, most of which are half empty, mislabeled, or possibly filled with pickled turnips. You check the marked casks, count out the communion measure, and resist the temptation to take a generous quality control sip. A quick pause for a spider rescue operation. You're not a monster, and you're back up again with wine stains on your robe and cobwebs in your ear. Evening mass approaches. You prepare the chalice, line up the wafers like holy dominoes, and mentally review the scripture reading for tonight. It's Leviticus. Again, you try not to sigh too loudly. And just when you think you've got 5 minutes to sit quietly in the chapel and rehearse, the door creaks open. Enter Maud. Every village has a Maud, the type who appears at odd hours, bearing large jars of something fermented, wrapped in too many shawls, and speaking mostly in riddles. Father, she begins, eyes sharp. There's a strange fog in my orchard. You pause. What kind of strange? The kind that hums. You stare at her. She stares right back. You offer to bless the orchard. She declines, but hands you a gourd of what smells like mead and vinegar, just in case the spirits are thirsty. You thank her, cautiously. Then Mass begins. Evening light filters through the high windows, casting long golden beams across the stone floor. The congregation trickles in, old men, weary mothers, a few children trying not to yawn. You begin the readings. Your voice echoes through the chapel. It's peaceful for about 7 minutes. Then someone coughs, loudly, wetly. Then a baby wails. Then a front candle goes out. You continue, unfazed. You're a priest. You've seen worse. Communion is given. Blessings are offered. The baby falls asleep mid-squawk, possibly due to the incense. And finally, with a soft closing hymn and a creaky door, the last parishioner drifts out into the dusk. You sit. For the first time all day, you just sit. Your knees ache. Your voice is hoarse. And your stomach reminds you that dinner was postponed by fog humming and spider warfare. You light one last candle and stay a while longer in the silence. The chapel is beautiful like this, empty, dim, quiet, and lit by flame. Historians still argue whether priests in smaller parishes had this kind of rhythm. Full days filled with both spiritual and wildly mundane tasks. Some records suggest structured monastic schedules. Others imply it was just survival, improvisation, and stubborn faith. You believe the latter. Eventually, you rise. The evening prayers are over. The wine is secured. The animals are mostly outside. You retreat to your quarters, which would be restful, if not for the scratching. It starts under the floorboards, migrates to the corner, and settles beneath your bed. Probably mice. Possibly something larger. You don't look. You pull the blanket higher and whisper a soft, half-hearted exorcism. Then a knock. Again. You swing the door open with the expression of someone about to invent new swear words. It's Brother Alwyn. He's holding a loaf of bread and an apology. Bert the first one, he says sheepishly. Thought you might want a second. You accept it like a sacred relic. Still warm. Smells like barley and salvation. He departs. You sit on your straw-stuffed mattress, candle flickering, mouse still scratching somewhere behind you. You take a bite. It's dry. You don't care. Dawn again. Except now, your body feels like it's made of lead and leftover sermons. You sit up slowly, joints popping like kindling, and pull on yesterday's robe because, well, it's already aired out and the cleaner one smells like turnips. You glance out the narrow window and see Brother Matthew already in the garden, hoe in hand, muttering something that might be Latin or just a very tired prayer. You're next on garden duty. No breakfast yet. First, you need to check on the church records. Your scriptorium is technically a corner of the vestry with one cracked bench, a pile of wax tablets, and a stylish chute at both ends. You're transcribing a list of local tithes, chickens, barley, suspiciously unlabeled cloth rolls. It's slow work, Your ink is running low, and your hands shake just enough to make every P look like a startled goat. The door creaks open. Again, it's old Father Hubert from the neighboring parish. He's arrived for the quarterly clerical meeting, which means you're about to spend 3 hours arguing about bell schedules, the morality of goose plucking, and whether Brother Thomas really is skimming cider from the communion jug. Peace be with you, he says. And also with your commentary, you mutter. You gather around the chapel table, joined by Hubert, Thomas, smelling suspiciously fruity, and Sister Joan, who may or may not be secretly running the whole diocese. She never blinks. The meeting begins. First topic, parchment shortage. Second, plague rumors from the east. Third, the mystery of the cursed icon that won't stay on the wall. Sister Joan thinks it's wind. Brother Thomas thinks it's sin. You suggest stronger nails. They vote on it. You lose. After the meeting, Hubert offers you a small pouch of dried figs as a thank you. You accept, though one of them seems to be waving at you. Now, finally, garden duty. You head to the cloister's edge, where rows of leeks, onions, and cabbage soldier on through the season. Your job, weed, water, and pray nothing's been eaten by goats. Or Hubert, the sun is high, the soil's warm, and you manage to find a rhythm. Weed, mutter a blessing. Repeat. Then a shadow. You look up to find a young boy, barefoot, nose running, holding a goose by the neck like a purse. Is this a sin? He asks. You blink. To hold a goose? He nods. The goose honks in protest. Possibly, you reply. You send him on his way with a piece of turnip and some vague moral advice involving geese and humility. Back to the weeds. Historians still argue whether rural priests were expected to maintain gardens themselves or delegate that to lay brothers. Evidence suggests a mix, depending on the size of the parish, the season, and how much the priest enjoyed carrots. You do not enjoy carrots. Back inside, it's time for confessions. You prepare the booth. Well, really it's a heavy curtain behind the altar, and try to remember your gentle but firm voice. The first penitent is a shepherd who's convinced his sheep are gossiping about him. The second is a widow who confesses she's replaced her husband's grave offering with chicken bones because he always hated lamb. The third is Brother Alwyn. He admits to dropping the communion chalice last week and replacing it with a similar-looking jug used for stew. You raise an eyebrow. During Mass, he nods. Everyone said it was the tastiest sacrament in months. You assign him 3 extra candle trimmings and a lecture from Sister Joan. By late afternoon, your back aches again. You shuffle to the well, draw water, splash your face. A small toad watches you from the stone lip, possibly judging you. A breeze stirs the trees. A bell chimes faintly in the distance. For a moment, everything's still. Then the chickens escape. Again, you sprint after them, robe flapping, sandals slapping, trying to recapture the dozen or so feathered maniacs Brother Matthew forgot to latch away. They scatter like holy chaos across the yard. One somehow ends up in the pulpit, another in the sacristy. You grab the last one mid-honk, triumphant, then realize you've just stepped into a puddle of something warm and suspicious. Sigh. You clean up. You try not to think about where the feathers in your pillow come from. Evening nears again. You prep for Vespers, light the first candles, and hum a chant you barely remember. The parish cat winds around your ankles. You pretend not to notice it dragging half a vole. Dinner tonight is thin porridge and last week's bread. You eat it slowly, savoring the way your jaw clicks with every bite. Brother Thomas offers you a sip of something special from a clay flask. You decline, politely, firmly. As night falls, you return to your room. The candle flickers low. You scratch a note into your journal. Day 132. Still alive, mostly faithful. One more goose incident and I may convert. Outside, the wind howls faintly through the eaves. Inside, your straw mattress welcomes you like an old enemy. You lie back and listen to the scratching. The bishop's envoy arrives the next morning, unannounced, naturally, riding a mule that looks equally unimpressed with its job. The envoy himself is a tall man in a crisp black robe, eyes scanning everything like he's mentally scribbling notes for a bad review. You barely finish swallowing a mouthful of coarse bread when he knocks at your chapel door with the kind of precision that suggests he's knocked on a lot of doors and rarely delivers good news. "Father," he says curtly. You stand, nod, try to remember if your socks match, and usher him in with a smile that feels more like a confession. The inspection begins. First, the altar linens. He lifts one corner and sniffs it. You don't ask why. Next, your records. He wants to see the tithe log, the sacrament roll, and something called a mortuarium register, which you're pretty sure you've never seen before. You hand him your wax tablets and a very stained scroll. He squints. You sweat. Then comes the questioning. How often do you hear confessions? Weekly, daily, constantly. You say too quickly. Any heretical incidents? Just the goose boy. He doesn't laugh. He writes something down. The envoy stays for supper, an awkward affair of boiled peas, quiet chewing, and one moment where Brother Thomas tries to offer him apple wine from a flask labeled "Do Not Trust." You kick Thomas under the table. He takes the hint. Barely. After the meal, the envoy retires to the guest cell. You exhale for the first time in hours. But you're not done yet. The village children come knocking, 2 of them, muddy-faced and wide-eyed. "Father, there's something in the graveyard." Of course there is. You grab your cloak, a small lantern, and a stick that once doubled as a palm frond during Easter. The children lead you past the chapel, through the crooked gate, and into the overgrown plot behind the church. There, among the crumbling headstones and thorny brush, stands a cow. Just standing, staring. You blink. It blinks. "She's been there since midday," one child whispers. You step closer, whisper a half-hearted blessing, and gently guide the cow back toward the fence. It's probably not a miracle, but then again, the saints were once normal people too. Maybe this cow just hasn't found her calling yet. Back inside, you mark the graveyard cow incident in your log, just in case. Historians still argue whether rural clergy were expected to record everything, or if that was more of a bishop's fantasy. Based on your experience, you err on the side of write it down, just in case the envoy asks. The next day, the envoy departs. He offers no compliment, no thanks, just a terse, "You'll hear from the bishop," which is either a threat or a postal delay. Either way, it's over. Sort of. You return to your regular duties, sweeping the nave, patching the corner where the rain got in, and preparing a homily that involves both Proverbs and the importance of washing one's feet. You also take a moment to finally chase the church cat out of the vestry, where she's set up a suspiciously cozy nest behind the candle storage. Then come the dreams. Not just yours. Everyone's. You hear it in confessions, in whispers outside the chapel. Dreams of fire, of bells tolling without cause, of fish swimming through the air and bones that sing. It might be the mold in the bread, or the moon, or just harvest nerves. But people are uneasy, so you prepare a special vigil. You light every candle you can find, including the odd-smelling ones from the bottom shelf. You dust off the chant book. You even polish the old reliquary, which contains what may or may not be a saint's knuckle. The villagers arrive slowly, wrapped in cloaks and curiosity. You lead a chant, low, steady, simple. The candles flicker, the shadows sway, and something settles. Maybe it's the ritual. Maybe it's just the comfort of routine. But people leave calmer, lighter. You do too. Back in your cell, you finally let yourself collapse onto your straw-stuffed mattress, which has somehow developed a soft spot right in the middle. A miracle, perhaps, or the result of all those nights you lay there, thinking of nothing and everything all at once. You drift off, only to wake before dawn, because the bell is ringing, and no one's pulled the rope. The bishop's envoy arrives the next morning, unannounced, naturally, riding a mule that looks equally unimpressed with its job. The envoy himself is a tall man in a crisp black robe, eyes scanning everything like he's mentally scribbling notes for a bad review. You barely finish swallowing a mouthful of coarse bread when he knocks at your chapel door, with the kind of precision that suggests he's knocked on a lot of doors and rarely delivers good news. "Father," he says curtly. You stand, nod, try to remember if your socks match, and usher him in with a smile that feels more like a confession. The inspection begins. First, the altar linens. He lifts one corner and sniffs it. You don't ask why. Next, your records. He wants to see the tithe log, the sacrament roll, and something called a mortuarium register, which you're pretty sure you've never seen before. You hand him your wax tablets and a very stained scroll. He squints. You sweat. Then comes the questioning. How often do you hear confessions? Weekly, daily, constantly. You say too quickly. Any heretical incidents? Just the goose boy. He doesn't laugh. He writes something down. The envoy stays for supper. An awkward affair of boiled peas, quiet chewing, and one moment where Brother Thomas tries to offer him apple wine from a flask labeled "Do Not Trust." You kick Thomas under the table. He takes the hint. Barely. After the meal, the envoy retires to the guest cell. You exhale for the first time in hours. But you're not done yet. The village children come knocking. 2 of them, muddy-faced and wide-eyed. "Father, there's something in the graveyard." Of course there is. You grab your cloak, a small lantern, and a stick that once doubled as a palm frond during Easter. The children lead you past the chapel, through the crooked gate, and into the overgrown plot behind the church. There, among the crumbling headstones and thorny brush, stands a cow. Just standing, staring. You blink. It blinks. "She's been there since midday," one child whispers. You step closer, whisper a half-hearted blessing, and gently guide the cow back toward the fence. It's probably not a miracle, but then again, the saints were once normal people, too. Maybe this cow just hasn't found her calling yet. Back inside, you mark the graveyard cow incident in your log, just in case. Historians still argue whether rural clergy were expected to record everything, or if that was more of a bishop's fantasy. Based on your experience, you err on the side of write it down, just in case the envoy asks. The next day, the envoy departs. He offers no compliment, no thanks, just a terse "You'll hear from the bishop," which is either a threat or a postal delay. Either way, it's over. Sort of. You return to your regular duties, sweeping the nave, patching the corner where the rain got in, and preparing a homily that involves both Proverbs and the importance of washing one's feet. You also take a moment to finally chase the church cat out of the vestry, where she set up a suspiciously cozy nest behind the candle storage. Then come the dreams. Not just yours. Everyone's. You hear it in confessions, in whispers outside the chapel. Dreams of fire, of bells tolling without cause, of fish swimming through the air and bones that sing. It might be the mold in the bread, or the moon, or just harvest nerves. But people are uneasy, so you prepare a special vigil. You light every candle you can find, including the odd-smelling ones from the bottom shelf. You dust off the chant book. You even polish the old reliquary, which contains what may or may not be a saint's knuckle. The villagers arrive slowly, wrapped in cloaks and curiosity. You lead a chant, low, steady, simple. The candles flicker, the shadows sway, and something settles. Maybe it's the ritual, maybe it's just the comfort of routine. But people leave calmer, lighter. You do too. Back in your cell, you finally let yourself collapse onto your straw-stuffed mattress, which has somehow developed a soft spot right in the middle. A miracle, perhaps, or the result of all those nights you lay there, thinking of nothing and everything all at once. You drift off, only to wake before dawn, because the bell is ringing, and no one's pulled the rope. Word count, 1070. Awaiting continue. Section 12. You throw on your robe and sandals, the chill biting harder than usual as you stumble outside. Mist clings to the chapel stone like breath on a mirror, and there it is, the bell, swinging gently in the tower. No wind, no visible rope puller, just the slow, steady rhythm of a bell tolling itself. You stand in the courtyard, eyes adjusting to the pale gray dark. Then Brother Thomas steps out behind you, holding his blanket like a cloak. "Did you call an early mass?" he asks, sleep in his voice and suspicion in his eyebrows. You both stare up at the bell. It stops swinging. The silence rings louder than the bell ever could. Back inside, you make a note in your log. Asterisk bell rang itself. Witness, Thomas. Mood, unsettled. Asterisk. Historians still argue whether medieval bells were ever considered sentient or enchanted. Some point to monastic records of bells that tolled during storms or births. Others suggest rope swelling due to humidity. You, personally, are starting to suspect divine mischief, or just a very persistent squirrel. The day ahead offers no time for unraveling mysteries. It's the feast day of Saint Felix, patron of gardeners, grave diggers, and people who work barefoot. And that means procession duty. You lead the villagers out into the fields, swinging your censer and praying aloud as you walk. The procession snakes between furrows of wilting cabbage and frostbitten herbs. Children trail behind with wooden crosses. Someone's goat joins in. The goat is not invited, but nobody has the heart to shoe it. At the farthest field, you stop for a blessing. The soil here is rocky, stubborn, tired. You sprinkle holy water, say the words, and hope St. Felix is listening. Then it's back to the village, where preparations for the midday meal are underway. It's meant to be a communal feast, a celebration of harvests past, the saints' intercession, and the fragile unity of your little flock. You help carry bread from the baker's cottage to the square. It's coarse but warm. The cheese is crumbly and suspiciously fragrant. One of the older women insists on offering a dried fish for balance. You accept it with all the enthusiasm of a man accepting a dare. The feast is simple. Singing, chewing, a brief arm wrestling contest between two men who clearly take their fish salting duties very seriously. You give a blessing before the meal begins, and halfway through the line, someone actually thanks you. It's a rare thing. You don't know what to do with it, so you nod and awkwardly say, "You're welcome, child," even though the person is 60. Then you spot the bishop's letter. It's tucked into the hands of a passing courier, who clearly mistook a feast for a post office. You accept the scroll with trembling fingers and read it right there, in the sunlight and the soup steam. Asterisk, Father, your parish's conduct during the envoy's visit is noted. Continued diligence. There is rumor of heresy in the north. Remain watchful. Asterisk, no signature, just the bishop's seal, a very smug lamb holding a banner. You fold the letter and tuck it into your belt. Back at the chapel, you find yourself staring at the bell tower again. No movement, no sound, but the memory lingers. You think about the ringing, the dreams, the sudden unease among the villagers. Is it just fear or something stirring? The evening comes quietly. You sit with Brother Thomas, polishing the altar candlesticks. He hums a hymn, off-key but steady. You catch yourself humming too. The rhythm comforts you, and for a moment, it almost feels like you know what you're doing. Until a knock comes at the chapel door. You open it to find a cloaked figure, face hidden, voice hoarse. "Father," the man says, "we need last rites." And quickly, your heart skips. Where? He gestures down the road, toward a hut you've only visited once. A widow lives there, or lived. You grab your kit, your oil, and your sense of calm, and follow him through the thickening fog. Inside the hut, a boy lies still. Not dead, but close. The widow explains in broken whispers. Fever, visions, words he shouldn't know. You kneel by him. His eyes flutter. His breath is shallow. You anoint his brow. Murmur the prayers. Watch the rise and fall of his chest like it's your own. And then, like a shift in the wind, he speaks. Don't trust the goat. You pause. The widow gasps. He hasn't spoken in days. You write it off as fever nonsense. But deep down, you remember the goat that joined your procession. The one that stared too long. The one no one invited. You bless the boy again. Offer comfort. Leave quietly. On the walk back, Brother Thomas meets you halfway. Was it serious? You shrug. He'll recover. I think. Then you add, under your breath, but we might want to keep an eye on that goat. The next morning, you wake with a pit in your stomach and straw in your hair. The bell doesn't ring this time. Thankfully, but the silence is unnerving in its own right. You rise, wash your face in the freezing basin water, and begin your usual rounds with a little more hesitation than usual. Something's shifted, and you feel it in the soles of your feet. You stop by the widow's hut again, partly to check on the boy, partly to see if he's muttering any other livestock-related prophecies. He's sleeping peacefully now. Color returned to his cheeks, and the goat. Yes, it's there again, lies curled at the threshold like a sleepy guardian. It gives you a look, You ignore it and move on. Today is Penance Day, which means confession cue. The villagers take turns stepping into the chapel and whispering their misdeeds from behind a linen veil hung with more holes than privacy. You listen. You nod. You offer penance, mostly in the form of candle lighting or 1 week of helping old Marta with her firewood. Confessions range from the petty, I took 2 figs from the cart, to the peculiar, I talked back to a chicken and it glared at me in Latin. You manage them all. Then comes the farmer. He walks in, hat in hand, and kneels heavily. Forgive me, father, he says, but I haven't been sleeping. You lean in. I hear breathing, he explains. When I lie down. Not mine. Not my wife's. Something else. In the rafters. You ask questions. He answers honestly. He's sober. He's scared. You assign a simple penance, a prayer to Saint Michael, and maybe, just maybe, a fresh thatching crew. The day wears on. You bless a card. You patch a shoe. You help rescribe a faded psalm. And then you check the bell rope, just to be sure. Still intact. Still suspicious. That evening, after Vespers, Brother Thomas comes to your door with a curious request. There's someone outside who says they're a healer. You step out and see the figure, tall robed, face lined with sun and years. She carries a pouch that smells like basil and boiled bark. She says her name is Livia. No surname, no village, just Livia. She's heard of your village's troubles, she claims. The dreams, the fever, the cow, the goat. She's seen it before in other parishes. Always begins the same, subtle shifts. Unspoken dread. Animals behaving too politely. You raise an eyebrow. She raises one back. Let me see the boy, she says. You take her. The widow is hesitant, but lets her in. Livia places her hands on the boy's forehead, whispers something too softly to catch, then places a coin wrapped in a sprig of rue under his pillow. Protection, she says. For both of you. You walk her back to the chapel, curiosity overtaking caution. What exactly do you think is happening? You ask. She smiles thinly. Something old. Something forgotten. Not evil, just unsettled. Historians still argue whether wandering healers were accepted by the church or merely tolerated. Some bishops embrace their knowledge. Others ban them entirely. In your parish, you'll take all the help you can get. That night, you set an extra candle in the nave. You whisper a prayer not from the book, but from something older, a phrase your grandmother once said while boiling herbs on a stormy night. It feels silly, but also right. Then you hear it, breathing, not yours, not Thomas's either. Low, rhythmic, above you. You grab your lantern and step outside, scanning the roofline. Nothing. Then something moves in the corner of your vision, a shadow, quick and deliberate. You turn your lantern toward it, but it's gone. Just the wind, probably. Just nerves. Or, back in bed, you lie awake longer than usual, listening to the silence. Then something thumps above your head. Once. Twice. You close your eyes. I'm not paid enough for this, you whisper. The next morning, you wake early, bleary-eyed but breathing. You light the altar candles. You crack open the psalter. And when the goat walks into the chapel, tail swishing, and lays down on the altar step, you say nothing. Just another day in the priesthood. You're halfway through your morning readings when the knocking begins. It's not the knock of a villager in distress, not the frantic thump of childbirth or a runaway pig. It's slow, deliberate. 3 times. Pause. 3 more. You step outside. No one's there. You skin the frostbitten path. Just empty mist curling between thatched roofs and the gentle sway of laundry forgotten on a line. Then from the far end of the village, a voice calls out, not in greeting, not in fear, but in song. A low, haunting chant in a language you don't quite recognize. You follow it, barefoot, because you forgot your shoes in the rush, and because some instincts run deeper than comfort. You pass Marta's cottage, her shutters are drawn, and the baker's where no bread bakes today. The air smells of damp ash and lavender, and nothing else. Then you see him, a man in traveling robes, eyes closed, arms lifted to the sky. He stands just outside the village gate, barefoot like you, a single crow perched on his shoulder. You blink. The crow blinks back. He finishes the chant. opens his eyes, sees you. Ah, he says, you're the one who lights candles and argues with goats. You nod, because yeah, that's you now. He introduces himself as a messenger. No further details. He's not here to harm, just to observe, and maybe advise. You ask who sent him. He shrugs. The same winds that brought the fever. The same dreams. The same shadows in the rafters. You don't invite him in, but he follows anyway. At the chapel, he kneels before the altar, touches the stone floor reverently, and begins humming. It vibrates through your bones. The goat twitches in her sleep. You whisper to Brother Thomas, "We're officially haunted, aren't we?" He nods without looking up. Mildly, that day, the messenger doesn't leave. Instead, he helps you bless the well, mend a leaking roof, and share a meal with the children. He knows every villager's name, even the ones who never come to Mass. One little girl asks if he's an angel. He smiles. Only on Tuesdays. Historians still argue whether traveling mystics were remnants of pagan traditions or sanctioned by secret monastic orders. The line between magic and miracle was thin and often blurred by dust and superstition. By sunset, he set up a strange spiral of pebbles and wheat husks near the chapel door. Protection, he says again, echoing Livia's words. You ask from what? His answer, from forgetting, from silence, from letting the old things rot alone. You're not sure if that's comforting. That night, the dreams return. But they're different now. This time, you're not alone in them. Livia is there, standing at the edge of a river of black sand. The messenger walks beside you, whispering riddles. The goat is glowing. You wake with a start. Everything is quiet. Then the bell rings. On its own, you leap up, race to the chapel, and find nothing amiss. No rope movement, no breeze, just the silent bell swaying slightly, as though recently touched. You mutter every prayer you know. The messenger appears behind you. Don't be afraid, he says. It's just the land remembering. You exhale. Remembering what? He places a hand on your shoulder. That it has a voice. You light another candle. You find your shoes. And you prepare for whatever comes next, whether it's divine intervention, goat-based prophecy, or just another particularly strange Tuesday. Because tomorrow is Holy Day, the feast of a minor saint, half forgotten and entirely obscure. And your sermon? You haven't written a word. And already you're behind. It's the feast day of St. Firmentius, or maybe it's St. Plegmont. You were never great with obscure saints. One of them converted Ethiopians, the other translated obscure Greek theology, and possibly once punched a demon in a vision. Either way, the villagers expect something inspiring, and you've got 2 lines scribbled on parchment and a doodle of a fish in the margin. You sigh, roll your shoulders, and pull your cloak tighter. The chapel is colder than usual. Not drafty. Asterisk, asterisk, still asterisk, asterisk. Like it's holding its breath. Brother Thomas appears, rubbing his eyes and mumbling a morning blessing that may also be a complaint. You're preaching, he says, without a trace of mercy. Good luck. You mutter back. Can't wait to talk about martyrdom before breakfast. You grab your ink, your candle, and what remains of your dignity. The sermon comes together slowly. You patchwork verses, toss in a parable about sheep that probably wasn't meant to be funny, but get a few snorts, and end it with a reminder not to throw chicken bones into the well. Spiritual and sanitary. Then Mass. The chapel fills. Everyone comes today. Even the man who claims sermons give him gout. The children sit near the front, whispering loudly. The goat is tied to the post outside, but bleats whenever you pause too long, like an impatient editor. You preach, and miraculously, no one walks out. A few even nod. One old woman tears up when you mention that St. Plegmund once healed a blind thief who returned every stolen egg. After Mass, the feast begins. Everyone contributes stew, stale bread, one surprisingly fresh figure. You say grace. Someone tries to ferment apples behind the well. The children make up songs. The crow from last week circles overhead like a floating punctuation mark. The messenger returns briefly, just to sit. He listens to the music, doesn't say a word. Then he leaves before dusk. leaving behind only a folded cloth and a single iron key. You don't ask. Later, the abbey sends word. A letter sealed with red wax, carried by a man on a donkey who looks like he's been arguing with the animal the entire way. The letter reads, Asterisk, you are hereby reassigned. Pack light. Asterisk, your mouth goes dry. You've heard the rumors. Reassigned sometimes means a quiet little post by a river. Sometimes it means you'll be translating heretical Greek for the rest of your life in a moldy tower. And sometimes it means you've made too much noise and they're sending you somewhere no one will hear if you scream. You reread the letter. No details. Brother Thomas says, well, at least you won't be here to bless every single chicken next spring. You start packing. Just a satchel, a flask, your crumbling shoes, and the key. You walk the village one last time. Marta presses a charm into your hand. Dried rosemary bound with hair. For safe travels, she says, eyes damp. The baker gives you an extra roll. The goat sneezes on your robe. The chapel bell rings without wind again. And you know, asterisk, you'll miss this star. This strange, damp, confusing life. The morning smoke and the children's laughter. The quiet prayers and the weird dreams. The impossible, relentless, glorious mess of being a priest in a place where even the shadows seem to whisper. You take the long road out, shoes crunching frost, hands deep in your sleeves. Behind you, the village fades into fog. Ahead, something waits. Maybe another chapel, maybe a tower, maybe a door that the iron key will open, one you haven't seen yet, but have somehow always known was coming. You breathe in the morning and walk toward it. So now, with the fires banked low and the chapel quiet behind you, take one last moment to feel the weight of it all. The incense clinging to your sleeves, the scrape of parchment beneath your fingers, the echo of prayers murmured in half-forgotten Latin. Let your shoulders drop, your breath slow, and your mind drift gently back through the still, candlelit world we've just wandered. You've endured blisters, blessings, and bell towers. You've faced questionable stew, prophetic goats, mysterious visitors, and one extremely opinionated rooster. You've wrestled with ancient texts and dreams you couldn't quite explain. And somehow, through it all, you stayed upright. Mostly, life as a medieval priest wasn't easy. It wasn't clean, or noble, or always righteous. It was muddy, complicated, lonely, but never entirely alone. And no matter how many times you lit that morning candle, it always flickered just a little before catching. So maybe, just maybe, you wouldn't have lasted a full day, but you would have tried. And that matters more than you think. Now, let that candle in your mind's chapel glow just a little longer. Let its warmth ease you into stillness. No sermons left, no goats to name, no bells to ring, only the soft hush of vellum turning, and the quiet promise that history, even at its weirdest, always has room for one more dreamer. Sweet dreams.